Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 974 Crack in the Wall. Chapter 974 Crack in the Wall. Desperate times calls for desperate measures. The Thunderfoot Patriarch ended up asking everybody for help regarding the stolen key. Of course, he didn't tell them the significance of this object, only that it was very important to them since it was a family inheritance. He also neglected to tell them it was an inheritance from the ancient humans. Because of that, many were quite disgruntled that he had to gather all of them for such a mundane request. Are you kidding me? After losing in the tournament, I thought I would wallow in my sorrows and booze by now. No offense, but this sounds more like a you problem. Is that all? I shall return to our camps then. The Thunderfoot Patriarch coughed. I am willing to offer Godforge pieces as a reward. I would appreciate any kind of information that would lead to the retrieval of our prized possession. As expected, this brought all the attention back to him. Who wouldn't want Godforge pieces? Everyone was familiar with the Thunderfoot business. They were famous for having tons of Godforge pieces to sell. Coming from them, this reward didn't sound bogus. Of course, a lot of these companies and groups didn't specialize in espionage or detective work. They did say that they would help in any way that they can, but they couldn't promise anything. The Thunderfoot Patriarch knew that. He wasn't trying to get everybody on board. Only the ones who were known for their espionage. Thunderfoot Patriarch. My name is Cedric Goldstone. It would have been nicer to meet under different circumstances, but it seems that you desperately need help. The Thunderfoot Patriarch smiled, taking the young man's handshake with both hands. Pleasure to meet you, my boy. Bjorn Thunderfoot. I knew you would be interested in this mission. If there was anyone who could help me, then it would be a conglomerate's information network. Cedric awkwardly laughed. My capabilities are not that good yet, I'm afraid, but I am pretty confident in finding out who's responsible for the robbery. That would be great, Cedric Goldstone. I will be looking forward to whatever you find out. The hours passed by, and deep in the night, a small group of shadows flitted around the cyclopean architecture of New Sparta. They glided seamlessly through the cracks, moving undetected despite numerous people walking through the thoroughfare between the quadrants. These people were a group of 5, all bearing the same formal black and white attire that would have been perfect for a fancy event. Sewn onto their chest was the crest of the Goldstone conglomerate. They stopped their journey atop one of the walkways on a rampart, looking down at a specific crack on the battlements. One of the men kneeled to the crack and sniffed it. This was where the trail led to. This was where the thieves ran off with the key. Their leader, the man who appeared in the viewing deck and whispered to Cedric, slowly reached for the crack. Ability power emanated from the man. A power nearly reaching the top of the body formation realm. His presence vanished even more as his hand extended forwards. But suddenly, electricity rumbled from the crack, almost zapping the man's fingertips. He quickly withdrew, the 4 others behind him taking defensive positions. Seeing such a volatile reaction, the man took a deep breath and shook his head. Retreat, he muttered to the men behind him. This crack was a lot more impenetrable than they thought. The only way to get inside was to brute force their way in, which would quickly alert the thieves inside. Sneaking inside almost seemed impossible as well. The defenses set up inside were made by someone above that of a body formation realm cultivator. Any entity that entered would quickly alert those inside of an infiltrator. In short, Cedric's information network failed. But it wasn't for a lack of skills. There was a reason why this crack hadn't been found by anybody else after all this time. especially in a place that was teeming with extremely powerful people. Whoever created this crack made sure to make it as impossible to get into as possible. "I apologize, Sir Bjorn," Cedric said, after relaying what his information network gathered. The Thunderfoot Patriarch paced back and forth, nervously biting his nails. If what they said was true, then this meant that they were facing an organization with a lot more bite than he initially thought. They even had their own pocket dimension in the middle of New Sparta. How bold. The fact that they could do that meant that they were an organization that the Thunderfoot Company simply couldn't contend against. "Thank you, young Cedric. What you gave me is still valuable information. At least now I know where to look." Bjorn gestured for someone to come forwards, and half a second later, Jasper came walking towards them. "Please reward our young friend over here some Godforge pieces for his trouble," he said to the Thunderfoot butler. "There's no need to, Bjorn. We failed." Cedric refused.
No, insist.
"You must take it or else consider yourself rude." In the end, Jasper awarded Cedric 100 kilograms of Godforge pieces for his help. Soon, the only ones left in the room was Bjorn and his butler. "That was too much, Patriarch." "It's okay. It's a gesture of appreciation and an investment. It's never bad to acquaint yourself with a conglomerate," Bjorn replied. "Besides, you think they don't consider that a paltry amount?" Jasper remained silent. He always forgot how obscenely rich conglomerates were. "Anyway, how are our reserves looking?" "Someone recently bought 700 kilograms of Godforge pieces, Patriarch." "What?" Bjorn's eyes almost bulged out of his socket. "Now that's too much. Who did you sell that many Godforge pieces to? We need to keep our reserves last till we get back that key. You know?" Jasper pursed his lips. "It was a friend of the young master's, a fellow named Keo. Even if he's Jotun's friend, you should. He's from the Reborn company." Bjorn's jaws almost dropped to the ground. Chapter 975 Instant Build. Chapter 975 Instant Build. Reborn? You mean the Reborn company with that magnetic demi-human? Jasper nodded. "You mean to tell me that my only son is friends with someone from the Reborn company who, despite their current rise to fame, rejects anyone who tries to make contact with them?" "Yes, Patriarch." Bjorn emphatically raised his fist. "Yosha!" he screamed out, startling the butler. "Bjorn, you sold them 700 kilograms of Godforge pieces?" "Only 700. Come on, Jasper. I taught you better than that. You couldn't have given them a bit more freebies to go with their purchase." This caught the Thunderfoot butler off guard. Bjorn was usually a miser when it came to Godforge pieces, always wanting to give out less with each transaction. Now he was talking about freebies. "Call Jotun immediately. I want to let him know the importance of friendship. Specifically, his friendship with the venerable Keo from Reborn." The next day, early in the morning, thousands of people were already lining up to enter the Colosseum. The excitement from yesterday hadn't passed and only grew stronger as conversations disseminated amongst the people. The word magnetic demi-human was the hot topic for most of them. Those that didn't get to see it themselves touted it as nothing but a lie, but were quickly challenged to see it for themselves. Hence, the longer lines for the Colosseum in order to get a better seat. The werewolves in charge of the lunar celebrations quickly had to dispatch more people to contain all the chaos and energy from the spectators. In fact, it seemed that everyone was a lot more lively during the second day. The Brownbloods certainly felt the change. They were currently being bombarded with all sorts of letters and propositions. Of course, Chief Lupin knew that they weren't for the Brownbloods, but their ally instead. The Reborn company didn't have much of a presence here in New Sparta. Aside from a small tent on the outskirts of the New Sparta walls, there was no other establishment that people could go to satisfy their curiosity about them. That was why Castell and the rest of the Rebornians were currently experiencing a hectic couple of hours in the morning. They were currently trying to build a bigger camp for the Reborn company, which was quite laborious given all the procedures and paperworks that they had to go through. In contrast to the frantic atmosphere in the Reborn company, Michael found himself waking up with a good mood. "What a nice morning," he said. You have logged in to the Emporium for 4 consecutive days. Yesterday, before he went to sleep, he received his 3rd login reward, which was a nice but disappointing 5% discount. He actually thought that the system would give him increasingly more impactful rewards as the login streak continued. But yesterday's gift disproved that. It was one of the lowest tiers of rewards he could get. So now, he was hopeful that the system would give him something a little bit more useful. Congratulations! You have received an instant drone completion ticket. Michael ignored the visual confetti and lighting, focusing instead on the actual ticket itself. Could it be? This ticket allows you to instantaneously build a batch of drones that you have ordered. His eyes widened. This was an extremely useful piece of reward. Mini drones usually needed about a day or 2 to finish completion. This didn't seem all that bad. But this meant that he couldn't buy mini drones and use them in an emergency situation. He'd have to buy it the day before. But with this ticket, he could easily purchase 100 mini drones and have them appear in front of him within seconds. This was an absolute game changer. And if that wasn't enough to lift him up from yesterday's disappointing login reward, ChatJK5 gave him a notification that he'd been waiting for what seemed like weeks. Your products are ready for delivery. Please pick them up at your earliest convenience. Like a kid on Christmas morning, Michael got up from his bed and brought out his drone. The metal artifact hovered in the air in front of him. Suddenly, it released a burst of steam as it released pressure from the inside. A rectangular opening appeared under its frame, before 2 objects dropped out of it right towards Michael's hands. One was a gun and the other was a talisman. Yes! He rejoiced. Even though he was 99% sure that ChatJK5 wasn't scamming him, he was still a little bit doubtful that he would get his delivery. But with the gun in his hand, he was able to verify it as real. He could feel unity emanating out of the revolver. Specifically, he felt it from the 6 bullets lodged in its cylinder. It was tangible, dense. It was unlike anything he had ever produced before. Compared to these bullets, his Unity saber and his Unity gun was like a child's toy. He could tell that those bullets really packed a punch, enough to kill even a nascent spirit cultivator. He never understood the appeal of guns back in his previous life. But now it felt awesome holding it in his hands. And in his excitement, he almost wanted to pull the trigger to test it out. Of course, he wasn't that wasteful. Next, he looked at the talisman in his left hand. It was made out of wood, with the symbol of the Yggdrasil tree burned and etched onto its surface. Upon a cursory glance, it looked quite simple. Nothing more than a quaint piece of jewelry. But that was because it was meant not to look conspicuous. It held all of its ability power contained inside the talisman itself, so that when an attack came, it could release a defensive power to completely negate the damage. A power from a 3rd-stage nascent spirit cultivator, to be exact. He quickly made a simple holster in his belt, hidden underneath his outer garment. Then, he tied the talisman into a necklace, hiding it beneath as well. Now he was fully armed and ready. Chapter 976 Very Dense Shadow. Chapter 976 Very Dense Shadow. With these 2 items, Michael was in a paradoxical situation where he wanted to test it out and not want to test it out. He wanted to see its capability, but didn't want to be forced to use it. And just at that moment, he felt movement in the ground as a friendly shadow came to visit him in his room. 2 figures emerged. Naruto and Sasuke kneeled in front of him, showing him even more deference than before. They were still grateful for the gift he bequeathed onto them the other day. But Michael didn't really consider it a gift. They were fully fledged Rebornians, ones who have an extremely important job to keep the balance of the Reborn company during their expansion. It was only natural that he gave them Godforge pieces. If they got stronger, then the entirety of the nation of Reborn would benefit from it. Case in point, he could already feel a difference in the 2 orc chieftains' entrances. Before, their presence was subtle, but still emanated dark mana wherever they went. That was how their shadow spells worked. With his supreme talent, this aberration in the surrounding mana would quickly alert him of their presence. But now, that aberration was basically non-existent. In layman's terms, he couldn't feel the ripple in the water as they submerged themselves under it. Of course, with his drone vision and his vastly stronger cultivation, he could still feel their presence even from a mile away. However, the fact that they were already so non-existent even when they were only in the first stage of the body formation realm bode well for their future. Lord Michael, Biututu, we come to you to report. Naruto banged on his own chest, the sound itself creating small spikes in ability power.
Rahtata.
As you have instructed, we have made it our mission to track down the thieves who stole the Thunderfoot key, Sasuke said, the quills behind him rattling with excitement. Michael was very glad to hear this. Looks like you're making good use of your new powers. What did you find? Naruto's shadow separated from his feet, before it began to morph and change into the surprisingly high-definition 3D image of a masked individual. We have verified the perpetrators to be coming from one organization bearing this attire. Michael rubbed his chin. As expected, the ersatz is in charge of this. We have made some rudimentary progress in tracking these individuals, and we suspect that they are being led by a person who is a high-ranking body formation cultivator who goes by the name Platinum Leader. This surprised Michael. You were able to track a Platinum Leader? With the difference in cultivation, that seemed impossible. No, Lord Michael. We dare not get close to a person of that caliber. They have a lot of securities in place to make sure that they would not get tracked down, Naruto said. But there is no security that is infallible. They are only as strong as their weakest link. We only needed to wait for one of them to make a mistake, to say something they weren't supposed to. That is how we were able to find their hideout, their stronghold. Sasuke's shadow morphed into a much larger structure. He created a wall, New Sparta's wall, and in one of the walkways in between the bastions, there was a crack in the structure that leaked a misty black gas. This is their stronghold? A pocket dimension. It's different from the stronghold that Fudge told me. It's a different one? It made sense. According to Katarina, a man as powerful and as guarded as the Grand Master would have multiple strongholds around his own hideout. That was what made infiltration so hard. The ones the Shadow Orcs found must be one of those surrounding strongholds, given that it was only guarded by a Platinum Leader, a 9th stage body formation magnetic. You did good, he praised them. Now that they knew where it was, they could appropriately plan how they were going to infiltrate inside. Since his opponent wasn't a nascent spirit cultivator, he had more confidence invading. What about the crack itself? What kind of defenses are installed inside? The 2 orc chieftains listed all of the mechanisms they found during their mission. First of all, the crack was made by someone above the nascent spirit realm, so it couldn't be broken through easily. Next, there were ability powers set inside to alert them of any unwanted intruders. This too was made by someone in the nascent spirit realm. Then, there were the guards stationed inside the crack, just waiting for someone to invade. From what he remembered during their raid to rescue Lyra, there were hundreds upon hundreds of guards stationed just on the parapets alone. He had a feeling that this would be the same case here. In short, it seemed the stronghold was made to be impenetrable. It couldn't be infiltrated nor besieged, unless one wanted an all-out war with 1,000 artifice magnetics. For now, we should gather more information and, ahem, Lord Michael, forgive our impudence, but we have already found a way to infiltrate inside. Ha! Then what about the impenetrable security measures that they just listed just a few seconds ago? Their structures may be infallible, but their people certainly aren't, Naruto said triumphantly, almost scoffing. We simply found one of their weak members and inhabited their shadow, Sasuke added. Michael was speechless. How? But then he remembered. You all went into that shadow? The 2 orc chieftains nodded proudly. Yes, Lord Michael. All 300 orcs were contained inside that one shadow. They are now currently inside their stronghold awaiting further instructions from you. If only one of the orcs inhabited the shadow, then his ability power wouldn't be enough to trick the crack's nascent spirit-level security system. But if all 300 newly awakened orcs all pooled their power, then it could easily overcome that barrier. The solution was that simple. Chapter 977 Preparation for Infiltration. Chapter 977 Preparation for Infiltration. The Orc chieftains were right. The ersatz defense was only as strong as their weakest link. By choosing a relatively weak member and inhabiting his shadow, the Shadow Orcs were able to infiltrate the infallible security systems set up by the ersatz. This was perhaps the only breach possible with their kind of defenses. It was only made possible by the fact that the Shadow Orcs all had ability powers that were of the same type, Shadow. That was how they were able to multiply their strength to increase their stealthiness enough to fool even a nascent spirit-level security system. And what's even more impressive was the fact that out of those 312 Shadow Orcs, including the 2 chieftains, only 12 of them had their own divas. The 300 high penumbras were still pseudo-magnetics for now, as they had yet to awaken their divas. They had the ability power, but none of the control needed to wield it. This meant that Naruto, Sasuke, and the 10 elite penumbras were able to successfully infiltrate the ersatz stronghold all by themselves. They coordinated the unfocused and unawakened ability power from those 300 and molded it to something much greater. Because of that, there was now a metaphorical Trojan horse filled with 300 Shadow Orcs just waiting to infiltrate their stronghold. The ersatz would have never thought that anyone would infiltrate their hideout in such an ingenious way. After all, there was no organization in the world who had hundreds of magnetics all with the same ability power with each other. Our brothers in arms were excited upon the possibility of earning enough merit to get another Godforge piece, Naruto said. We are all eager to prove ourselves worthy, Lord Michael. Well, the Shadow Orcs certainly outdid themselves. They did something Michael would have trouble doing himself. They defied his expectations in the best of ways. Take your time and gather as much intel as you can on the stronghold, he instructed them. I want the exact numbers as well as the layout of their castle. As you command, Naruto saluted. We shall inform you once the job is finished, Sasuke declared. With the orcs infiltrated inside, Michael could easily teleport himself to the stronghold and get the key himself. But he hesitated. If things went south, he could confidently deal with the Platinum Leader, but he was still not confident that they could fight against possibly thousands of ersatz magnetics. Even with the help of the Shadow Orcs, they would still be at a disadvantage. And Michael hated going into something where victory wasn't assured. He knew he needed something more before attacking. Something that could pad up their numbers to match theirs. And the answer was right in front of his face. Mini drones. Right now, he only had 14 mini drones, which wasn't enough. He needed hundreds more if he wanted to fight an all-out war against their stronghold and come out victorious. And thanks to the ticket that he got from today's login, he didn't have to wait a day before the mini drones were created. Now he just needed the money. Thankfully, that wouldn't be that much of a problem. He looked into his mind's eye and saw his Unity clones back in the nation of Reborn. They had been creating Unity power sources non-stop. That should be enough to fulfill some backlog orders, as well as new ones. He quickly teleported himself into the Dwarven castle, where he was met with excitement. They couldn't stop themselves from praising the phone. They had been tinkering with the ones they received just a few days ago and were even more amazed by its creation. And when he told them that he was willing to take on more orders, they were beyond exhilarated. We'll buy them. In the end, he sold them 500 phones to be delivered in the coming days. And just like that, Michael was up 5 million sand dollars once again. That was equivalent to 500 mini drones. But of course, this wasn't enough for him. He needed 312 mini drones just for the Shadow Orcs themselves. 188 mini drones were inadequate for this type of mission. He needed more. Much more. Next, he teleported himself to Metropolis. One of his most loyal customers was none other than the Duchess Regina herself. And he did promise her that if there was another batch of phones, he would sell it to her first. But when he arrived in their castle, she was nowhere to be seen. She wasn't even in her favorite spa back in the nation of Reborn. He caught up with her twin children, Prince Harry and Princess Elizabeth. Both were in their mansions in the nation of Reborn, already fully migrated.
Michael.
Hey, have you seen the Duchess? I thought she'd be with you guys. The two siblings looked surprised. She didn't tell you? She said she was going out to visit some friends. We thought she'd be visiting you. Michael never heard of this. In fact, he didn't even think the Duchess had any friends at all. Where could she be? Anyway, Michael, are you perhaps selling more of those phones? Prince Harry asked. What a coincidence. As a matter of fact, yeah. I'll buy 400 phones, said Princess Elizabeth. Hey, I was going to order first. Sorry, I said it first. The two dignified, adult royal siblings began quarreling like little children. Don't worry, I can fulfill both of your orders. The two calmed down after that. As it turned out, they both had some friends of theirs who were extremely jealous of the phones that they showed off during one of their meetings. So now they were buying it for them so that they could all communicate with each other with no latency. He sold them both 400 phones each, totaling to 800. This already reached well above the limit of what he could produce at the moment, but he let them have it or else one would be bitter about the other having more. All in all, he was able to get 13 million sand dollars in total. Chapter 978 Semis Bets. Chapter 978 Semis Bets. With that much money, he could purchase 1,300 mini-drones. This was a comfortable number to have during the stronghold raid. Now, he just had to wait until the shadow orcs were done with their infiltration. Just then, he felt a vibration in his pockets as a text message came through to his phone. Came from Shiina. The second day of the archery tournament was about to start. The whole Colosseum rumbled in excitement as the semifinals finally started. Claudia stood at the very center of the stage, watching the raucous cheering erupt even louder. Brown blood werewolves. Send in your archer. Shiina stepped forward, her glimmering white scales creating an ethereal aura around her. The mystery and myth surrounding her as the first demi-human to achieve magnetic status also added to that indescribable aura. The crowd cheered for her like madmen. Hephaestus Company. Send in your archer. Despite the tumultuous cacophony of screams in the Colosseum, everyone heard the footfalls coming from the person walking up the stage. His presence drew a sharp breath amongst everybody watching. They almost forgot to cheer. Even with his small stature, everybody could feel a sense of danger within him. His sharp eyes seemed to indicate his awareness of his surroundings. The black eyeliner on his naturally dark skin also added to that effect. The spectators behind him shivered. It was as if he had eyes on the back of his head. Shiina and the sharp-eyed man faced each other on the stage. And interestingly, neither were intimidated by the other. Meanwhile, Michael found himself back on the viewing deck amongst his peers. Everybody was already glued to the arena. Neytiri, really? You have to send in Ahmed for this? Gabriel said, disappointed. We are supposed to give the competitors a chance to win, Cedric reminded her. By sending in one of your most talented allies, you're basically making sure no one wins. Neytiri was indifferent to their criticisms. I don't believe in weakening myself for show. Besides. Then, the dark-skinned woman turned her head to Michael. Kyo, care to make a wager? Michael finally sat down on his seat next to Yuna. Neytiri, Yuna hissed. Shush, friend. Can't I play a little game with your boyfriend? Or are you too jealous for that? Besides, it looks like he's interested, aren't you, Kyo? In truth, Michael was curious. He wondered how much sand dollars he could squeeze out of her. What kind of wager? He asked. What else? My ally versus yours. If we win, then you'll allow me to take a look at that demi-human's weapon. Neytiri eyed the compound bow with an ardent curiosity. She noticed its uniqueness yesterday, and her smithing instincts told her that there was something extremely special with the way that bow was made. Even her formal training from the main Hephaestus conglomerate was unable to help her decipher its secrets. That fact alone made it stand out like a glimmering jewel. So you're interested in the compound bow? The mere mention of the name made Neytiri's eyes wide, pupils dilated. She looked like a cat about to pounce. Yes, I just want to look. But what if I win? Michael asked. What do you want? She quickly replied. Michael had a feeling she would accede to any request he made right now. $1,000,000 sand dollars. The whole room almost gasped at that number. That was an astonishing amount for a mere bet. Even the other conglomerates had their eyebrows raised. Make that 2 million. In exchange, I want to handle the compound bow with my own hands, she countered. Michael immediately took out his hand. Deal. She spat in her palms. Deal. Gabriel and Cedric originally wanted to dissuade Neytiri and Kyo from making that bet. But Neytiri's request was pretty harmless. So when she won the bet, she wouldn't make too much trouble. Of course, Shiina winning didn't even cross their minds. This wasn't the only case of bets happening around the Colosseum. As the two fighters readied themselves in the arena, multiple bettors were already roaming around the spectating area and taking bets. The odds were in Ahmed's favor. Not only was he 2 stages above that of Shiina, but he was also a conglomerate-trained archer. The quality of their education was miles above that of geniuses. And in a certain viewing deck, there was a small gathering of about 3 people. All women who looked to be advanced in age, yet still haven't entered the twilight of their prime years. One of them was an old woman wearing a simple robe and a white cloth wrapped around her eyes. Most knew her as her title as the Sword Mistress or the Heavenly Sword Knight. But only a few get to call her by her name, Eldia. Long time no see, Eldia. Get it? See? Ho ho ho. The old woman laughing wore a dirted and grimed jumpsuit over a white t-shirt. At least it was white before all the dirt and oil stained it all over. You haven't changed, Rivet. Even being a mystic master won't help cleanse that crude humor of yours, Eldia responded. The meeting of these 2 powerful old women should have caused immense fanfare equal to that of the current archery tournament. It was rare for a heavenly knight and a mystic master to be so close to each other. Now, I didn't gather you all here to bicker, said the last woman sitting on the table. She wore regal attire and bore the mien of one. Eldia turned to her. Regina, why did you gather us here? Duchess Regina smiled. Nothing. I just wanted to catch up with old friends while watching an interesting game. Rivet wiped her nose, staining it with a streak of oil. Well, you are right. We are witnessing a demi-human magnetic rite before our very eyes. Lots of potential. Could someday become worthy of the upper echelon. You don't think she's not worthy now? Regina asked. Clearly not. She's just in the 3rd stage. She'll need a little bit more power if she wants to defeat this Hephaestus kid here. Regina smiled. Care to bet on that? Chapter 979 Space. Chapter 979 Space. Back in the arena, Claudia walked towards both archers. Both of you know the rules. Send in your arbiters and discuss the sanctum. Yuna was already waiting by the sidelines. She stepped up alongside Shiina, facing her opposite. Another distant Montgomery family member. We propose a sanctum with the dimensions in the z-axis 3901. Already, there was quite a steep difference in quality from the arbiters Yuna faced before. The level of detail in which he described the terrain was almost maniacal, going over even the most mundane cracks on the ground as if they were an important feature of the sanctum. Most amateur arbiters would quickly get drowned in technical jargon, unable to keep up with such sharp propositions. At the very least, they would miss 1 or 2 critical secret advantages that would get buried under thousands of words. But not Yuna. I veto that outcropping section of the sanctum. It would give your archer a head start in spotting their target. I counter that with a similar and mirroring small hill. Her opponent frowned as Yuna attacked with her own flood of technical information. There were even some terms that she used that he wasn't familiar with. The two battled on with their wits and knowledge for a good few minutes. The fans of arbiters, who knew the technical prowess that they had to pull off with each sanctum, appreciated the level of quality between the two of them. Despite being younger and more inexperienced, Yuna proved herself able to contend with the veterans of her family. Many praised her for her talent. In the end, the two arbiters settled for a compromise. The sanctum's terrain would be located in a zero-gravity environment in which small meteors were endlessly floating in space. This would provide a very neutral environment in which no archer had the advantage. They would have to fight in an arena that both weren't familiar with. Yuna tapped Shina's shoulder for good luck before returning to the viewing deck. Claudia then waved her hands in the air, tremendous ability power brewing in her body, before a giant circular hole appeared on the surface of the arena. Ready, set, enter. With her words, Shiina and her sharp-eyed opponent jumped into the sanctum. Both fighters plummeted towards the endless dark space like meteorites. Sharp-Eye skillfully found his balance while tumbling through the zero-gravity environment. He performed a roundhouse kick, stopping his momentum entirely. It defied the laws of physics. Ability power, Shiina guessed. It seemed that Sharp-Eye's diva related to physical strength as well. Sharp-Eye kicked, propelling himself back towards a medium-sized meteor. Landing on its south pole, he brought out his bow and drew up a shot. His arrow flew through space unimpeded. With no air resistance, it was extremely fast. The arrow hunted Shiina, who was currently just a few meters away from her meteor. She changed her plans and brought out her bow. She drew the dark wood, an arrow magically manifesting with it. Her arrow shot forth, its arc coinciding perfectly with Sharp-Eye's arrow. The two projectiles collided, creating sparks as one battled the other for supremacy. The weaker will get tossed aside. Sharp-Eye's brows raised, surprised by the accurate shot. Indignant, Sharp-Eye's body emanated with ability power. Above him, reddish swirls of light gathered to form the figure of the constellation Taurus. Ability power threads extended from the bull's horns like a laser, hitting the point of contact between the two arrows. Suddenly, a shockwave exploded out of Sharp-Eye's arrow, propelling Shiina's arrow outwards. It noticeably lost its magical glimmer, with Shiina noticing her connection with the arrow break off. The bullish arrow then shot towards Shiina, its speed twice as fast as it was before. Shiina landed onto her meteor, before using it as a launching pad to propel herself back into the open space. The bullish arrow shot through the meteor where she would have landed. It pierced through the hunk of rock like it was a piece of butter. A moment later, the undisturbed meteorite exploded into thousands and thousands of rubble, each rocketing off into space at speeds seemingly inheriting the same velocity as the arrow that destroyed it. Shiina shielded herself, a prismatic bubble shimmering around her to protect her from debris. Eventually, she landed onto a new piece of meteorite, finally finding solid footing. She looked at her opponent, who was retrieving another arrow from his quiver. His arrows steal and take momentum, she analyzed. I need to watch out for debris. Sharp-Eye loaded up another arrow, shooting it directly towards Shiina. She jumped away from her meteorite before loading up her shot. The meteorite exploded into pieces once again, sending chunks outwards at incredibly fast speeds. Shiina ignored it, her unity defense burning off any attacks. She loaded multiple arrows and released it in quick succession. Her arrows flew through space and seemingly disappeared as it passed through the meteorite's debris. Sharp-Eye quickly turned around, seeing an arrow about to hit his chest. The Taurus above him roared, flashing its horns. His body shifted ever so slightly in such a fast speed that it looked instantaneous. Shiina's arrow arrived, piercing through just less than an inch away from the target in his chest. His armor helped as well, letting the arrow skid just enough for Shiina's arrow to miss. Sharp-Eye frowned. He'd seen the demi-human's near-perfect accuracy from afar, but experiencing it himself was a new thing entirely. It was scarily good. Just then, Shiina's arrows instantaneously appeared once again, each targeting different parts of his body. His body shifted even more, his Taurus diva taking the velocity from the debris flying around him. Each of Shiina's arrows missed just a hair's breadth away from the target. And with his armor made by a Hephaestus itself, the arrows only made a mere indent into the metal. "You're good," he shouted to Shiina. "But I cannot take it easy on you." Neytiri said not to. A small shockwave emanated from his body, the Taurus above him roaring silently. The power of a fifth-stage body formation cultivator was on full display, and in comparison, Shiina's presence was minute. Her third-stage cultivation dwarfed, and her juvenile white dragon diva blithely yawned, giving her no point of intimidation at all. "I shall take that in mind," Shiina replied with a smile. Just then, Sharp Eye released his arrow, destroying the meteor that Shiina stood on. She jumped ship towards another. But with another arrow, Sharp Eye destroyed that one as well. He didn't want to be the one to do this. But he didn't want to disparage the reputation of conglomerates. His arrows chased Shiina through the belt of meteors, each one destroyed and giving her no chance to regain her balance. Not only that, but with each meteor he destroyed, the whole battlefield was getting filled with more and more meteoric debris. They clouded the whole space for both Sharp Eye and Shiina. Not only that, but because these were debris that he personally destroyed, they were being imparted with his ability power. It was literally clouding his opponent's vision. Sharp Eye didn't know how Shiina used her powers, but he knew the fundamentals. An archer was only limited by his vision. And with this cloud of debris, there was even less chance for Shiina to use her enigmatic powers. "I am very much impressed with your skills, Sir Sharp Eye," Shiina said as she jumped from one meteor after another. The meteorites around her were getting increasingly low. "But I hope that you don't take ill will from the Reborn company for what I am about to do." Sharp Eye frowned. Amidst the cloud of gray debris, he saw Shiina's figure floating in the dark space. She drew her bow, and he quickly obscured himself with even more debris. He looked indistinguishable from the meteorites. But just then, the compound bow in her hands began to glow. It began to glow with even more power than she originally started with. This surprised Sharp Eye. What? It was only not that he noticed that she was just not using the entirety of her strength. The bow in her hands was only now being stretched to its fullest. The string in her bow seemed to convert that power into something even more terrifying. But he consoled himself. If he couldn't be seen, he couldn't be hit. Unbeknownst to him, here in the darkness of space, there was something observing him from behind. It was a mini drone. The compound bow in her hands was noticeably different from the one she had before. It didn't have its aiming reticle. With this vision, Shiina readied her bow. And with a quick release, the arrow shot through the space. And within a few seconds, it immediately appeared behind Sharp Eye and accurately hit its target. Chapter 980 Brilliant Meteorites. Chapter 980 Brilliant Meteorites. Sharp Eye felt a piercing pain in his back before he was sent tumbling uncontrollably through the dark, endless space. Debris pelted his body. It took him a hot second before he was able to reorient himself in the right direction. He closed his eyes. It only confused him. He performed a swift karate punch, completely stopping his momentum. He swung his arms, fanning the space dust covering his body. Once he found his kilter, he opened his eyes and looked behind him. An arrow pierced through the painted target on his back. Dead center. 5 more direct hits and he'd be defeated. Meanwhile, Shiina floated gracefully in space, unaffected by zero gravity. Her aim certainly wasn't. Sharp Eye glared at her. No amount of analysis could make him understand how she was able to hit him. She somehow saw him throughout all the dust, clouds, and smoke. Gritting his teeth, he reached into his pockets and swallowed a pill. Instantly, the wound on his back regenerated. Spitting out the arrow lodged a couple of inches into his body. It didn't negate the point she gained, but it at least healed him back to full. This was one of the main advantages of being in a conglomerate. Lavish use of resources. That pill would have cost 100 sand dollars to purchase. And he had more to spare. Renewed, Sharp Eye activated his ability power. His Taurus Diva roared. The debris around him turned into a standstill, their momentum completely stolen. His body suddenly rocketed towards Shiina at speeds much faster than his arrows. He now realized the massive gap between him and her in terms of archery. It was as deep as this dark space itself. His only way of victory now was through hand-to-hand combat. Sharp Eye arrived, his body rotating to a front flip kick. Shiina held out her compound bow. She drew her darkwood string. It had no arrows loaded, yet she released it nonetheless. The cumulative power from her bow whipped forwards, allowing her to escape out of Sharp Eye's attack. He shook his head, before both of his arms moved to his head in a circular pattern. Ability power emanated from his body, the Taurus above him skidding its hooves. He punched with his left hand, with his right hand pulling back. A masterful use of momentum. The two counteracting forces suddenly coincided with each other, aided by his diva. Sharp-Eye chased after Shiina. His body seemed to hunt after her like a homing missile. Shiina finally loaded an arrow in her bow, releasing it straight to Sharp-Eye. He didn't falter. He shot towards her, fully expecting the arrow to come towards him. The arrow disappeared, reappearing right in front of his chest. His eyes widened. His upper body blurred as he twisted his arms. Shina's arrow tumbled away as he punched it away from him. This was another advantage of being from a conglomerate. He trained in every single aspect of dueling. He was an archer who mastered brawls. Shiina shot her empty bow, using its power to fly backwards. She loaded the arrow in her second shot and aimed it upwards. The arrow left the compound bow. It disappeared only an instant later, before reappearing on Sharp-Eye's right shoulder. Sharp-Eye swerved to the left, simultaneously swiping the arrow away. But just as he did, he felt another piercing pain in his left shoulder. An arrow had lodged itself in the second target. He lost another point. Before he could groan in disappointment, he immediately pushed himself back as another arrow appeared in front of his chest. He punched it away, but not before another arrow on his leg distracted him. Sharp-Eye tried his best to counterattack, but Shiina would not let up with her arrows. She pelted him with unavoidable shots. Only his training in martial arts saved him from certain defeat. Anxious, Sharp-Eye propelled himself further and further away, kicking and punching arrows away as he did so. Unfortunately for him, no amount of distance could make Shina's arrows any less accurate. Another arrow lodged itself in his right thigh. 3 down, 3 to go. Sharp-Eye swallowed another pill and gritted his teeth. He was being rushed into a corner. It won't be long before he loses completely. He needed a new tactic. He reached forwards and gathered debris in his palms. He crushed it, forming a mini-meteor. He reached for more debris, creating tens of mini-meteors in a matter of a few seconds. Shiina continued to pelt him with arrows. Eventually, another arrow pierced through his shoulder guard, and then another to his thigh. Now, there was only one target left that remained. His chest. Shiina readied herself. For the last few seconds, her opponent disregarded defense in favor of creating those miniature meteors. He exchanged those 2 hits for hundreds of mini-meteors, almost reaching 1,000 in total. He was planning something, and it seemed that he was finally done. He faced Shiina. Then, he punched forwards in quick succession, creating a flurry of attacks that hit nothing but space. The Taurus diva above him roared. Suddenly, the hundreds of meteorites trembled, slowly inching forwards. As Sharp-Eye's punches increased, so did the meteorite's speed. Eventually, all hundreds of them came barreling down towards Shiina, each one imbued with the power of a 5th-stage ability power. It wasn't something Shiina could offhandedly ignore. The crowd above held their breaths. Shiina held out her compound bow. Glowing motes lights swirled in her fingers as an arrow's shaft manifested. The dark wood in her hand glowed, power building as she stretched it to its limits. The white dragon diva above her finally shook off the laziness in its eyes. It turned serious and roared at the meteorites. Shiina released her glowing sun-like arrow. Then it disappeared. The arrow reappeared right in front of each meteorite, having seemed to duplicate itself to match its opponent. The dark, endless space turned brilliant, like a sky filled with sparkling fireworks.
Chapter 981 Impossible beau. Chapter 981 Impossible beau.
The meteorites and the incandescent arrows clashed. Their momentums were stopped, something that seemed impossible. A 3rd-stage ability power fighting a 5th-stage ability power to a standstill? That was inconceivable. Yet it did. But just then, everyone's attention was quickly stolen by a blur. Sharp-Eye whizzed towards Shiina. The meteoric spectacle above him made for a very captivating distraction. In his hands were his bow, which was strangely oriented in the opposite direction. The drawstring faced forwards, facing Shiina. Under the brilliant lights of the meteorites, The bow's string glimmered. It wasn't something made out of mere twine. It was steel. This was another benefit of having a conglomerate's backing. Specifically, the Hephaestus Company's backing. Unrivaled weapons. The weapon in his hands doubled as a bow and a sickle. The steel string could cut through anything. He charged towards Shiina, swinging the steel towards her. He caught Shiina at the perfect time. She had just released her arrows to deal with the meteorites. No opportunity to load another. Shiina quickly changed her stance. From a straight, archer-perfect posture, to a pose that bore a similarity to swordsman raising up his shield. She held the compound bow horizontally on its end, putting its curved part forwards, ready to meet Sharp Eye's attack. Sharp Eye scoffed before their two weapons finally clashed. Steel against steel. His ability power imbued into his hands, pushing his weapon even further forwards. He wanted to cut this compound bow. This bow that Neytiri so desperately wanted to see. Was she not proud of their own weapons? His face scrunched as he used all of his power, until he felt his own bow trembling. His eyes widened. The string emitted a shriek. A discordant sound that only occurred when something was about to snap. Then it did. The steel string exploded like shards of glass. Its fragments glimmered in the darkness. Sharp Eye felt the resistance cease, and his momentum forced him to continue pushing his weapon forwards. His bow met the compound bow with another clash, and before he could push it back, the bow cracked at the point of contact. It broke in half, spilling splinters into the zero-gravity environment. Sharp Eye was rattled. He couldn't do or say anything as he fell forwards into Shiina. A glowing arrow manifested into her hands, and he fell chest-first into it. She finally hit all of her targets. This was her win once again. Sharp Eye felt his body getting pulled forwards as the sanctum teleported him back into the arena. He fell on his knees, holding the fragmented pieces of the bow in his hands. The Brown Bloods achieved victory. They advanced to the finals, Claudia announced to the crowd. But instead of the raucous cheering and shouting, this victory was met with silence. The crowd couldn't utter a single cry. Their eyes were still processing what they just witnessed. The Hephaestus Company was defeated? That alone would not make sense in any sort of context. But that wasn't the only thing achieved during this fight. All attention was placed into the broken weapon in Sharp Eye's hands. A weapon made by the Hephaestus Company, the conglomerate renowned for their unrivaled smithing techniques, the company who made their money by selling the undisputed strongest metalwork products in the world. Yet, it shattered like nothing against that strange bow of Shina's. Neytiri herself was even more shocked than anybody else. She made that bow herself. It was a product made out of her impeccable skill. Her family even considered it good enough to be sold as a genuine product of the Hephaestus line. And with her skill, she knew that the compound bow looked interesting. She was impressed by the mechanical leverage that it could produce. Far more than normal bow designs. That was what intrigued her about the bow. But she would have never thought that its durability or strength would surpass her own by a very large margin. Her bow laid in pieces, while hers remained unscathed. Neytiri's eyes shifted back and forth, her mind trying to understand what happened. Mithril? That was the only thing that explained its incredible diamond-like durability. But that wasn't the only feature from the bow. Neytiri's mind flashed back to the moment Shiina drew her bow to its maximum limit. That strange dark brown vine-like string glowed with ancient power. It was the ideal combination of elasticity and hardness, perfect for a bow string. But that was something thought to be impossible without Darkwood. Her head swiveled to face Kyo, her face full of disbelief. If her guesses were correct, then that compound bow was not only made out of pure mithril, but also darkwood. This was more than a perfect bow. Transcended that. Kyo turned to face her, and with a teasing and nonchalant tone, he said, "Pay up. Pure mithril and darkwood. I thought I would never get to see the day." Eldia the Heavenly Sword Knight muttered. "Who are you kidding? You can't see," Rivet joked. "But kidding aside, this is truly a myth come to life. I'm sure the demi-human's popularity will skyrocket by this point. A legendary weapon and an impossible magnetism. A perfect storm. I would have snatched her up myself, Eldia said. But I can see she is already destined for something else. How tragic. I've seen two magnificent talents in my lifetime, but not one of them is destined to walk my path. Rivet raised her eyebrow. Magnificent talent? High praise. Who's the other one? Eldia stayed silent. She remembered that swordsman back in the Brown Blood tournament. A demi-human too. Come on. Tell me. You'll really keep it to yourself. Rivet persisted. She shook the blind old woman's shoulder incessantly. Eventually, someone got tired and loudly coughed. Ahem. I think both of you are forgetting something. Out bets. Both of them turned to Duchess Regina. Rivet started cleaning her ears. Did we even make that? I forgot. Swordmistress Eldia nodded. I don't remember seeing an agreement. The Duchess's face scrunched. Then, she brought out a metal brick and played a recording. Okay. I'll bet 10 million sand dollars that the demi-human will lose. Chapter 982 Bragging Duchess. Chapter 982 Bragging Duchess. The two old women looked at the phone in the Duchess' hands. What kind of magical instrument could repeat their voices with such accuracy and stealth? They didn't even feel any kind of ability, power, or magic used. Regina. What is that? Rivet asked. The Duchess proudly flourished her phone. This just proved that our bets are still valid. Now pay up. Rivet got up off her feet and stared at the metal brick. Her eyes glimmered, a magic circle manifesting in her irises. She was a mystic master. Something like this should be right up her alley. Her senses scanned the screen and the buttons. Nothing fancy, just well-manufactured products. It was something that she wouldn't have a hard time replicating. She probed deeper. She wanted to see the inner workings of the object, see the magical infrastructure that allowed it to work as it did. But as soon as she reached down into the power source, she flinched backwards. That's mithril. There was a brick of mithril just hiding inside this strange object. She would have never thought that such a precious object would be wasted on something like this. At the very least, it should have been used on the outer frame. Wait! Rivet's eyes widened. Her heartbeat skipped. Using her immense magical control, she was able to peer through the very mithril box itself. And there, she found out the reason why mithril was needed. This object hid a very powerful source of energy. A power that could destroy all kinds of matter in this world. A power that was thought to have been lost in the passages of time. Unity. This metal brick held unity inside it. Rivet's eyes focused even deeper. She began to inspect the flow of energy through this mechanism. And there, she found out that it was this unity exactly that was allowing the object to function as it was. She looked at the screen and saw her face being replayed at the moment that they made the bet. Somehow, this object could perfectly create a facsimile of reality like it was a moving painting. And it didn't need magic or ability power to do this as well. It was all based on mechanical and physical ideas that were currently above what she could currently understand. This was a complex use of technology. It was miles above anyone's ability to manipulate physics and metals. Even she, a proud innovator of constructs, struggled to understand even the basics of how to create something like this. Could the ancient humans have created this? Could their understanding about them be wrong this entire time? Were they a civilization with more advanced technology? Where did you find? I bought it for 10,000 sand dollars, the Duchess replied. What? Rivet wished that she had Regina's luck. She must have bought it from a clueless excavator who didn't know what he had. This should cost way more than 10,000 sand dollars. Why? You want one too? Huh? I can buy you one if you like, Regina said casually. That's actually one of the reasons why I wanted to talk with you guys today. I've recently been contemplating retiring from my station, and it has come to my attention that I wouldn't be able to see you too much after I do so. Rivet and Eldia were surprised. Retirement? So that's why she's been absent for most of New Sparta. Anyway, I wanted to keep in contact with you guys, and this phone will help with that. Of course, you gotta pay your debt to me first. My funds have been running low hoarding phones. Then, she eagerly showed her friends all the features on the phone. But it's all worth it. Look, we can call or text each other using this button right here. Or we can even send pictures. Wait, Rivet interrupted. You make it seem like this ancient object can be bought like it's some kind of commodity. The Duchess shrugged. Michael is limiting the purchasing of the phones, but I'm close with him. He'll make an exception. I'll tell you all about it later once you have your own phones. Anyway, you can also have sodas and beer delivered right to your doorsteps using this. Her two friends were stunned into silence as the Duchess continued on gushing about the phone. Meanwhile, the only thing they could think about was one thing. Who's Michael? Meanwhile, back in the viewing deck, everyone was still reeling from Shina's victory. This was completely unprecedented in every facet. An underdog defeating the conglomerates. A third stage beating a fifth stage. A demi-human defeating a human. Nobody expected this except for one. Michael walked over to Neytiri. She was still focused on the compound bow as Shina bowed out of the arena and returned to their private quarters. A bet's a bet, he said. Neytiri turned back at him, an absent-minded look on her face. Finally, she shook her head, getting rid of her reverie. She reached down into her pocket and took out a small metal box. She tossed it forwards, with the box glowing a magical blue as it suddenly expanded 20 times its own size. With a thud, the box landed right in front of Michael's feet. He opened the box, inspected his winnings, before nodding in satisfaction. Nice to see you're a woman of your word. Then, without waiting for a response, he took the chest and walked out of the room. He left the entire viewing deck even more flabbergasted than before. Michael discreetly found an uninhabited corner in the Colosseum before descending into his own shadow, teleporting back to the nation of Reborn. A second later, he ascended into a dark room with barely any flickering lambent lights. Two shadows emerged in front of him. The two orc chieftains. We are ready, Lord Michael. You only need to say the word. This was the reason why he left so abruptly. It was time to raid the stronghold. Chapter 983 Stronghold Layout. Chapter 983 Stronghold Layout.
1,523 $.
That was how much money he had a few days ago. He was almost completely broke. The two essential items he bought from the Emporium completely drained his bank account. But thanks to the Reborn phone, he was able to easily accumulate 13 million in one fell swoop. Then add 2 million more to that thanks to his bet with Neytiri, and also 100,000 more from his monthly roller coaster revenue. He had a grand total of
15,101,523 $.
A staggering amount. Michael stared at his inventory with a lot of satisfaction. He almost didn't want to buy mini drones just so that it would stay in the 8-figure range. But no, he couldn't let his vein get the best of him. All of those sand dollars would be used to buy mini drones so that they could finally siege the stronghold. Without an army of magnetics or a nascent spirit cultivator like Katarina by his side, mini drones were the only thing that would allow him to invade Erzatz and live to tell the tale. It was the great equalizer. And with 15 million sand dollars, it would do much more than equalizing. Bu-Tutu, we have made our analysis of the stronghold, Naruto announced proudly. Kiki, those plebeians didn't see it coming. They have completely let down their guard, solely relying on their impenetrable entrance. We have made quick work of their weakness, Lord Michael.
Rahtata.
The other orcs cheered with their orc chieftains. Their morale was currently at their peak. They couldn't be more excited to finally have some action in New Sparta. Show me the entire layout, he said. Naruto complied. His shadow morphed to create a top-down 3D topographical view of the entire stronghold. The entire thing was surrounded by bulwarks and towering ramparts that made it impossible for mortals to scale. Above those tall walls were guards and soldiers patrolling around the walkways, occasionally looking down the battlements for any kind anomaly. They have 20 soldiers always stationed at these 6 walls. And there are hundreds more waiting on the bastions constructed at the connections of these walls. Narito reported. The orc chieftains gave a rundown on what to expect. Where the guards were stationed, when they would be rotating their shifts, how many they were at a time, their lines of sights, and everything else. Michael was even surprised that the shadow orcs even considered what kind of lunch these guards were eating during the day. It's important, Lord Michael. Food is one of the great indicators of when someone will excrete their wastes. Michael regretted he asked. Anyway, although the guards stationed on the walls were numerous, they weren't too strong. Most of them were in the first to third stage of the body formation realm, which was very much manageable. Orcanines. We will strike this wall first and fight our way through to the entrance of the castle. Kill any enemy you see. Biututu. Narito's fiery words certainly lit up motivation within his group. He began assigning missions to his shadow orcs, giving them all specific operations to fulfill. We will not fall behind, Orcupines. We will focus our forces on these entrances. Eliminate all stragglers. No one will come in or out of the stronghold.
Rahtata.
Even though the shadow orcs were an organized group, they couldn't help but let their innate cultural differences create a little bit of tension between the two groups. The Orcanines wanted to prove themselves better than the Orcupines, and vice versa. Michael didn't mind. Somehow, this little rivalry only made the shadow orcs more focused and motivated. But he was a little bit concerned to find out that it wasn't just the magnetic shadow orcs who were involved in this task force. Even those who didn't receive their own Godforge pieces had their own missions. They need to be forged by the flames of war, Lord Michael. This is the only way that they will finally be accepted by the Holy Godforge, said Narito. It's their rightful test. They need this to grow, said Sasuke. Michael was a little bit worried about sending mortals to a magnetic war, but seeing the looks on everyone's eyes, it seemed that he would only make it worse if he intervened. They were ready. Their eyes were focused and sharp. The rejection they felt a few days ago galvanized them to work even harder. And now was the time for them to show their hard work. Just make sure not to fight magnetics one-on-one. Use numbers to your advantage. If you're isolated, run. It is not cowardly to retreat. They all nodded at his words, but he had a feeling that these orcs would still fight till the very end rather than retreat. He inwardly sighed. Thankfully, that's what his mini-drones were for. With hundreds of them patrolling the area, he could make sure no shadow orc would get cornered. How about the inside of the castle? He asked. Narito nodded and shifted his shadow, now zooming into the castle in the middle of the hexagonal walls. Once inside, he saw a jumbled and convoluted connection of rooms and tunnels. It was like he was looking at a bisection of an ant hill. We have mapped out most of the rooms, Lord Michael, bar a few. The kitchens, private rooms, and public areas were clearly shown with even the furniture mapped out. However, there were some rooms that were completely darkened. These were critical rooms in the castle. Ones that Michael guessed housed the important assets of ersatz. And the one in the very middle, located in the darkened throne room, was where Michael guessed the Platinum Leader was supposed to be. We couldn't go anywhere near that, Sasuke said dejectedly. He consoled the Orcupine chief. It's only natural. He's a 9th stage magnetic. I'll deal with him. And with that, the plans for the stronghold siege was finally settled. It was time for Michael to finally buy his mini-drones. Chapter 984 Conk. Chapter 984 Conk. Michael teleported himself out of the orcs' shadow realm, still feeling the highs of their rejuvenating shouts. He was back in the Merman Lake. And this time, he didn't wait for the mermen to give him a bubble. He dove straight down into the sunken ship, letting his absolute unity defense take care of the depths. He immediately located Serena, who was wandering around with the other mermen. Oh, Michael, it's great to see you. Have you seen the second filter you installed? It's done amazing. He immediately stopped her. Sorry, but I kinda have something else in mind to do today. Can I exchange for more Su drops? Hearing his urgency, Serena nodded. She waved her hands, creating another vortex in front of her. Can you make it a little bigger? He asked. She raised her eyebrows before complying with his request. The vortex grew to thrice its size, towering over Serena herself. Michael thanked her before using his shadow to access his inventory. And then a second later, sand dollars began pouring out onto the vortex. They became a blur. They were going so fast that the whole thing looked like a solid pillar endlessly shooting towards the vortex. Serena could only hold her breath as she watched the scene unfold. Tens of thousands were passing by with each second. How much was that? 15.1 million. And just as she was about to explode in shock, the vortex suddenly trembled, creating mist and bubbles all around. "What's happening?" he asked her. Serena turned her attention to the aberration. She'd never seen her vortex act like this. Nothing in the world could disrupt this process, the same as how nothing could stop the sun from rising in the morning or setting in the night. This was made by the Ocean King himself. It wouldn't be disrupted unless, just then, the vortex suddenly constricted, as if something or someone was squeezing it through a different space entirely. Michael could even see a hint of a hand's indent gripping the water. An object shot through the top of the vortex, landing squarely in Michael's hands. It definitely wasn't the Sue drops he was promised. It was a conch shell. It fit squarely on the top of his palm and had a little bit of iridescent coloring on its ridged surface. "What is this?" He turned to Serena, who was currently laying almost face flat on the ground, her tail curved upwards. "What are you doing?" But then he noticed that she wasn't the only one who was doing this weird pose. It was every single merman in the vicinity. The mermaids curved their tails upwards, while the mermen retracted the fins on their back. They are currently performing obeisance. As it turned out, Serena was performing the equivalent of a bow or a curtsy in merman culture. "Father," she muttered. Michael was surprised. Father? The Ocean King? Immediately, he tried to sense his surroundings to search for that presence. This was perhaps the first time he would come in close contact with an actual supreme being. The very pinnacle of strength and power. A ruler of the world. And not just any world, but the entire oceans themselves. Unfortunately though, aside from the vortex, he couldn't see anything else. "That was my father. I can feel his control on the vortex. He did this." "He gifted that to you?" Serena said, rising up to take a look at the conch in his hands. Michael weighed the conch in his hands. "For a gift from the Ocean King himself, I would have thought he'd be a lot more generous." "What is it?" Serena put her hands in akimbo. "It allows you to create your own vortex. You can now exchange for Sue drops anywhere you want as long as there's water around." After hearing that, Michael was a little bit more appreciative of the Ocean King's gift. It was a lot more convenient, that's for sure. But there was still something that he was disgruntled by. "This gift is nice and all, but where's my Sue drops?" Just as he said that, the conch in his hands trembled and shot away from him. Then, a vortex appeared from its hole, before shooting out a large jug towards him. Michael caught the jug, and immediately, he knew that it contained Sue drops. "The jug contains 1,600 drops of Sue. Thank you, Ocean King." "Father must really be taking a liking to you," Serena said. "I've never seen him dote on someone like this before. He's practically giving away Sue drops." Perhaps the Ocean King was just a really good salesman. Only by giving away freebies will he ensure that his greatest customer would keep coming back. "Anyway, thank you, Serena. I'll make good use of these drops." She nodded before giving him a wave. The other mermen and mermaids, on the other hand, performed their cultural obeisance towards him just like they did earlier. It seemed that being graced by the Ocean King's presence upped his credential with the mermen by a substantial amount. But what use would that be? If he could exchange that with Sue drops, he would. Michael opened the jug and immediately splashed its contents onto his drone. The mithril artifact became engulfed in a large bubble of transparent and very viscous water. The Sue drops were so voluminous that the drone took a good 10 minutes before it was able to fully absorb everything. Finally, Michael turned to his mind's eye. Mithril artifact. Drone. Spirit of old. 1,600 drops. Expansion. Drones. Mini drone. 14. Expansion 1+. New rooms 12+. How satisfying was it to see a 4-digit number in the Sue category? Euphoric. Of course, he was going to use everything to buy mini drones. New, isolated rooms would be good for business but not for this current problem. He needed all the help he could get fighting against an ersatz stronghold. Besides, he could always earn more in the future. Chapter 985 Distributing Drones. Chapter 985 Distributing Drones. Michael pushed the button and watched as the number of Sue drops plummet to 0. His heart ached. But soon after, he was healed by the vision of nanoparticles suddenly swarming out of the mini drone's surface. An entire ocean. A literal cloud of bee-like nanoparticles emerging from out of nowhere and beginning to morph into condensed forms. He was very glad he did this in an open space back in the parched lands. Otherwise, the whole room would get drowned by these gray nanoparticles everywhere. Estimated time of completion: 7 days. Creating 1,600 mini-drones wasn't an easy task. 7 days was fast by any other context. But Michael couldn't wait that long. Heck, he couldn't wait another day. The ersatz stronghold stole the Thunderfoot's inherited key. They were planning something with that. No way did they steal that for nothing else. And Michael promised that he would do everything in his power to completely destroy ersatz and all that they stood for. The faster he disrupted their plans, the better. Mithril artifact. Drone. Mini drones. 15. Discount. 1x, 50% coupon. 1x, 5% coupon. Delivery. 1x, instant delivery ticket. 1x, 2 days off delivery ticket. 1x, drone completion ticket. Items. UNC, breathtaking Magnum revolver. 6-round revolver cartridge. UNC branch of Yggdrasil talisman. He clicked on the last delivery coupon, the one he received only earlier today. It would be ideal if he didn't have to use this, but at least he would be using it with 1,600 mini-drones instead of only a few hundred. Use this coupon? Yes. Immediately, he saw the surrounding cloud of nanoparticles around him shake and tremble. They suddenly started jittering, their speed becoming so fast that they were blurring in the air. It almost looked like they were being fast-forwarded in time. It only took a few seconds before the numerous condensed pellets in the air solidified into a solid mass. The nanoparticles surged towards it, creating the familiar grooves and edges of a mini-drone. It wasn't long before Michael saw an entire armada of mini-drones austerely lined up in the air around him. 12 rows of mini-drones spanning across the lands. 12 more columns further away from him, all rising up 12 more times upwards, creating a cube-like formation of 1,600 mini-drones. It was a true sight to behold. Michael felt elated seeing so many mini-drones. Each one could shoot their own Unity gun, almost at the same level as he could. He was an entire army by himself. This was amazing. Arga! The eventual splitting of his brain finally caught up to him. He was so caught up in his own fascination that he completely neglected to remember this crucial step in creating a new mini-drone. It was quite interesting. Maybe some part of him purposefully makes him forget so that it wouldn't traumatize him from creating more. About an hour later of groveling on the ground, squeezing his head like a watermelon, and regretting all of his decisions, his brain finally stopped aching. His consciousness was now split into 1,600 different parts, all in charge of maintaining a mini-drone. The feeling was indescribable. With the added visual and sensory information from all mini-drones now available to him, he felt like he wasn't a person anymore. He was a place. He was the piece of space where his mini-drones were currently in. And credit to ChatJK5, there was a burst of dopamine in his mind after this grueling process. It made him think that the hour of pure hell was all worth it. He didn't even mind going through that once more. Although he was pretty sure that once he was actually experiencing it again, he would quickly regret that decision. But it doesn't matter. Now, he had 1,600 mini-drones ready for use. With a mental command, he ordered all of his mini-drones to return to his main drone. All 1,600 of them simultaneously descended back down into a single point above the main drone's frame, their figures shimmering as they all slowly coincided inside each other without problem. And if he so chose, he could easily deploy all mini-drones anytime he wanted. So, after a little bit more practice with controlling his mini-drones, he finally felt ready and returned to the orc's shadow realm. Lord Michael, you too.
Rahtata.
Michael gestured for the orcs to stop kneeling. Now was not the time for niceties. Now was the time for war. Step forward. The orc chieftains, the 10 elite penumbras, and the 300 high penumbras all presented themselves to him. And with a gesture, his drone dropped its invisibility. Then, the rectangular bulge at its top frame shivered as 312 mini-drones deployed out into the open. You will be in charge of your own mini-drones. They will follow you and support you in your missions. He taught them the basics. If they wanted the drone to shoot something, all they had to do was use their shadows to mark their target. Next, he deployed the rest of his mini-drones out in the open. The orcs gasped in shock at seeing the armada. I will assign hundreds of mini-drones for our mortal shadow orcs. Do not stray away from them, as they will serve as your main weapon and your main defense. He taught them how to control the mini-drones as well, and they quickly learned the basics. We are incredibly grateful, Lord Michael. We can feel your presence with these mini-drones, said Naruto. We will not fail you, Sasuke said decisively. Orcs, you all know what to do. Do not disappoint our lord. You too.
Rahtata.
The Orcanines slapped their muscles. The Orcupines strummed their quills. The anticipation for battle was quickly growing. Yawn. Are we too late? Everyone turned to look at the side. There, 3 figures emerged from the tunnels of darkness. Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.